Babylon, man, I've been so torn thinking about this world lately. Babylon, truth is so deluded and it drives me crazy. Babylon,
This lost world is so hopeless.
Babylon,
Jesus Christ, that's where hope is.
Babylon, no matter what they
Yeah.
say, it's still so lost,
listen.
so rough.
Better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Also, that the soul be without knowledge, it is not good. And he that hasten with his feet sinneth. The foolishness of man perverteth his way, and his heart fretteth against the Lord. Wealth maketh many friends, but the poor is separated from his neighbor. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. Many will entreat the favor of the prince, and every man is a friend to him that giveth gifts. All the brethren of the poor do hate him. How much more do his friends go far from him? He pursueth them with words, yet they are wanting to him. He that getteth wisdom loveth his own soul. He that keepeth understanding shall find good. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall perish. That is Proverbs 19, 1 through 9. This is Resisting Balaam, a podcast where we seek to encourage the saints to stand firm with him on his word against all of the accusations made by the world, the flesh, and the devil, as we engage the culture of death that demands the sacrifice of our children. I am Callie, and this is a Wrath and Grace podcast. Go check out the guys at wrathandgrace.com. Please like and share this episode. There's a lot of important information that is going on during the Texas primary elections, which are going on right now. So please share this episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/resisting Balaam. So, like I said, we are in the election cycle in Texas. Last year was our legislative cycle, and this year it's elections, and the primary elections are going on. This episode is not about voting, should one vote, how should one vote, or anything like that. But it is about a specific primary election that's going on within the Texas House. Last year, Stephanie Click, who is a longtime establishment Republican, killed the bill of abolition. And she also did a bunch of other horrible things, promoting and sponsoring unjust bills, letting the highest record of pro-life bills out of committee and getting an award for that, just as long as she killed the abolition bill. She killed a bunch of other things like the transgender reassignment bill and a whole bunch of horrible things. During all of that, David Lowe primaried against her. And right now, he's polling very well. And The establishment is coming to her rescue, being supported and endorsed by the governor, Texas Right to Life, America's United for Life, Texas Alliance for Life, all of the major pro-life groups, but also Jeff Leach, who was the committee chair that killed the abolition bill 2 years ago. So what does that have to do with this episode? Well, one of the things that I would like to talk about in this episode are some of the lies and mischaracterizations that both Jeff Leach and Stephanie Click are currently spreading about the abolition bill in order to paint David Lowe as being bad. And this has to deal with prosecution. So Jeff Leach is quoted earlier this week as he started backing Stephanie Click in the newspaper when they were talking about this race and how bad she's losing in this race, even though she has 3-4 times as much money and the backing of the establishment. He's quoted in there talking about the Bill of Abolition in order to paint David Lowe in a bad light by saying that one of the main reasons why this bill is bad is because it makes women vulnerable to the death penalty. Now, this is an actual true thing. I am going to start outlining all of the lies that they're spreading, all of the mistruths that they are spreading about this one topic. But he starts out by saying that it makes women vulnerable to the death penalty. Women that kill their preborn children. I guess I should be more specific. And this is actually a true statement. It is something that I agree with, and it's something that we should all be for. The issue is how he is framing his statement. When we are talking about equal justice, what we are saying is that we want the laws, and in this case particularly dealing with criminal homicide, we want those laws to be applied equally to all people that commit acts of criminal homicide. We want the laws to be applied to all principal actors, all co-conspirators, and all accomplices to all forms of criminal homicide. We want the judicial process or prosecution to happen for all individual cases of criminal homicide. And by that we mean that we want evidence collected, and based off of the witnesses or line of witnesses of 2 or 3, the DA, who has discretion to look at the evidence and decide if there is a charge, and if so, what charge to bring. And if there is a charge to bring, it's presented before the court in a trial where the defendant has an opportunity to defend themselves and admit their own evidence. And then a jury decides, based off of the evidence, whether the one who is charged is guilty or acquitted. That is what equal justice is. that every single individual instantiation of criminal homicide is judged based off of the evidence of that one case. The problem is, when it comes to abortion, we are forced to talk in terms of the woman who kills her own preborn child, rather than talking about justice being applied equally to all principal actors, all co-conspirators, and all accomplices to the crime of criminal homicide, because the pro-life establishment, through their organizations and through their legislators, have all singled out and targeted women as the only demographic that is completely removed from the judicial process. And because the pro-life movement has targeted women and removed them from this process, we are forced to have this discussion in terms of the woman, because that's the way the exception to criminal homicide is written. It is not to be considered criminal homicide if the actor, or if the one who commits this crime, the one who does this action, is the mother of the preborn child that has died. That's the language of the exception in the homicide code. So as we have a bill of equal justice that removes all of the exceptions, it is that one exception that the pro-life movement is having a huge problem with. So it is true, we do want all people that are charged with criminal homicide, that go through the whole process, because we believe in due process, the whole judicial process of gathering the information, making the charge, having the trial, and coming to the punishment phase. We want every single person that is charged with criminal homicide to be vulnerable to the death penalty. But in this case, we are specifically talking about abortion. And because the pro-life movement has targeted women, we are forced to have the discussion in terms of women that kill their own preborn children. So yes, it is true that the abolition bill does make women vulnerable to the death penalty, but you could equally say that it makes men that kill their own preborn children vulnerable to the death penalty, or abortionists that kill some lady's preborn child for money is vulnerable to the death penalty, or that a woman that stabs her born child or husband or any person out there is vulnerable to the death penalty. Because what we are saying in equal justice is that all people that are going through this process are vulnerable to the death penalty. It is not saying that they all get the death penalty, which is something we'll talk about here shortly. But vulnerable, yes. And that is if there's evidence to bring a charge. And if, in the presentation of that evidence against the evidence of the defendant, the jury finds them guilty, then yes, they will be vulnerable to the death penalty. So problem number one I have with what Jeff Leach said is not about the truth of the statement, but rather the way that it's framed. It is framed in a manner to say that it is wrong to want justice. It is wrong to want the death penalty for the crime of criminal homicide. And his point is particularly when we are talking about women that unjustly kill their own preborn children. Now, without going into all of the reasons why they say this, what I would like to do is go over some of the things that they say about this that are just incorrect. They're straight out lies. They are misleading. I don't know if they do it on purpose, but what I do know is that they've been told the truth. And I know that because I've told it to them directly. Now, when I say Stephanie Click, I also mean her chief of staff, her office, because some of these things that I'm going to be talking about, she has said. Some of them are things that the chief of staff has said that I've directly spoken to on the phone and recorded. You can go check out some of those videos. Cheryl's also done some of these videos. Most of the content that I'm talking about today, we have on various videos, but because of this election and the smear campaign, I thought it was important to bring all of these together. So one of the things that they say when it comes to the prosecution of women that kill their children and their opposition to our bill that removes that exception is that we want to go around and retroactively execute anybody who has ever had an abortion. There's two problems with this. One, we are not dealing with punishment. Those things are already outlined in the homicide codes. All we are doing is removing the exception for women that kill their own preborn children. All we are doing is asking for or demanding that the judicial process apply to all cases of criminal homicide, all principal actors, all co-conspirators, and all accomplices. Has nothing to do with punishment. The other problem with the retroactive accusation, let's say that they didn't even say that we're trying to execute them, but that we are trying to have them brought to trial. We're not trying to do that. Nobody's trying to do that. And in fact, it's illegal, it's unconstitutional to try and convict a person for a crime that was legal when they committed that crime. These are called ex post facto laws, and our Constitution speaks about it twice. We cannot, nor is anybody trying to, make this law retroactive to where we go and they say punish, but I'm going to be more generous and charitable here and say try them and apply due process to women that killed their preborn children when it was legal. So why is this unconstitutional? It is unconstitutional. You can't do it. The law is not trying to do that, and we're not promoting it. But I want to explain why it is in the Constitution in two places. Why you cannot have ex post facto laws. why you cannot try somebody for a crime when they committed that crime when it was not a crime. It's because it allows for and it provides a viable positive defense. It is a rational and viable defense to say it was not a crime when I committed this crime. I cannot be held legally responsible for doing something that was not a crime when I did it. It's the fact that you have a legal, viable, positive defense, which puts you beyond reasonable doubt. You cannot be tried for a crime that you commit when it was not a crime at the time that you committed it, because it gives you a viable, positive defense. So that is the myth of ex post facto laws. They like to use it. I heard it several times from Jeff Leach. I've heard it several times from Stephanie Click and her chief of staff. He said that to me on the phone, and I corrected him, and they still say the same things, regardless of being corrected in the past. But I want to be charitable and say that they are misunderstanding, because I don't want to get into their possible intentions of why they are lying.
It's no secret that true masculinity is being lost. We are attempting to recapture the essence of true godly manhood, biblically balanced just as the Lord intends it to be. We do this by highlighting the interest of the everyday man and pointing them to real wisdom only found in the gospel. One of our top priorities is to shine light on and support ministries on the front lines battling the evil deeds of the flesh and Satan. A portion of all online sales go to ministries such as Resisting Balaam and Bridge Ministries Laredo to further the kingdom and bring glory to his name. So who are we? We are husbands. We are fathers. We are sons. We are friends, and we are brothers. We are reformed man.
Another misleading thing that they say specifically about the prosecution of women, when they talk about it, they talk as if we are not seeking to have due process, that we are solely talking about the punishment phase. Now, I will say that at least this time, when Jeff Leach was quoted in the newspaper, he did say vulnerable to the death penalty. And they like to harp on the death penalty for women that kill their own preborn children as if that's, one, a bad thing, but two, as if it is a realistic thing that is going to start happening the very moment that we remove women that kill their own preborn children from the exceptions of criminal homicide. And it is utterly ridiculous to say that we are going to start executing women that kill their preborn children. Just by looking at the history of Texas, capital punishment, and how we treat women in capital crimes, they are playing on emotion rather than the history of how Texas has operated. In the past 150 years, the state of Texas has executed a total of 6 women. And the last one was in 1998. And these are not for killing your own preborn child. These executions were for violent, you can see the carnage type killings that just disturbed the even conscience of the population. There have been 6 women in 150 years that have been executed for criminal homicide. There were more women convicted of criminal homicide last year than convicted in the past, or than executed in the past 150 years. All we have to do is go to the crime statistics for Texas, and if you just go look up how many women have been convicted of criminal homicide by year, you can see that Texas does not have a history of executing women for even gruesome, in your face, in broad daylight, all the evidence, killed 5 of their children with knives, won't execute them. And Jeff Leach and Stephanie Click want to act as if by removing this exception, we are going to start executing women in Texas. It's playing on emotions that are not even based in reality. They're making it up. Now, this isn't commentary on whether Texas ought to apply the death penalty more often. I personally think that we should. But this is commentary on what Texas has done and the way that pro-life legislators are lying about this bill to mislead people into thinking that we are going to instantly start executing women who, A, have previously had abortions, and we talked about why that is just not true, and B, ones that we convict now for killing their own preborn children. A lot of the problems from this debate that they have about making women vulnerable to prosecution, sometimes they say, they're talking about removing them from the exceptions. We have to look and go, why is justice bad in their eyes? Why are they playing on the idea that because we want justice, that's a bad thing? They do not believe that it is just to apply the criminal homicide laws to every single instantiation of criminal homicide, to all principal actors, co-conspirators, and accomplices. Because if they did, they would not target women as the only demographic removed from the process. Let me see, what are some of the other lies they tell about the prosecution of women? This is a really big thing that they're harping on right now because of this primary, and they're using it as a smear campaign against David Lowe because he wants to provide equal justice. He wants to remove that exception, and so they want to use that as a way to tell everybody that he hates women. Right, that he wants to kill and to execute women that kill their children, because they promote the idea that women that kill their own children, as long as that child's a preborn child, should not be prosecuted at all for that crime. It should not be a crime for a woman to kill her own preborn child. They want to continue to promote the exception that says explicitly it is not to be considered criminal homicide if the conduct charged is committed by the mother of the preborn child.
We are Titus 2 women, seeking to glorify God through the teaching of younger women, biblically, to love their husbands, children, and be keepers of the home.
Not grudgingly or as a legalistic chore, but rather to joyfully sacrifice in loving their husband and children as unto the Lord.
Giving glory to God and finding joy in caring for our families in only the way wives and mothers can.
As God has blessed us with female traits that make our work in the home essential to a godly home.
So in the end, they do not want it to be considered criminal homicide for women as long as they are killing their own preborn children. They do not want to prosecute women for this crime. They are targeting them as the only group of people that are immune for prosecution for criminal homicide. And they rely on mistruths that they're victims, that they don't know what they're doing. They don't have the necessary knowledge and intent that makes this a crime, and I've dealt with this in other videos. They believe, or they at least promote, that women are coerced into it, and I have an episode dealing with that. This one, I mainly just wanted to deal with some of these lies that they say about prosecution, as they really hit home the way they hate justice and how mad they get at anybody that believes that we should apply justice equally. I just wanted to clarify some of those things that I've been hearing throughout this campaign as they try to smear David Lowe for wanting justice. So as you go about voting and just looking at some of these laws, ask yourself, what is the just thing to do? What does it look like to apply justice equally for every individual case? Because we're not saying that all women instantly get the death penalty. They have to be tried. And if some woman is being legitimately coerced, That is a positive, viable defense for her. If somebody really does not understand that what they are doing is a crime, that is a positive, viable defense. And we let due process happen. We let the evidence be laid out in the court and let the jury decide. That's what we're asking for, is for every single individual case to be judged based off of the merits of that case. And that's what equal justice is. So until next time, join the resistance and wield the sword of truth. Our Lord has left us here to navigate through this world as priests in the kingdom of God. Apply the mind of Christ and battle against the culture that hates God and loves death.